First on BBC One, See Here.
Hello and welcome to See Here. This is Roger Berry MP. I'll be talking to him in a minute about that mass lobby of Parliament which took place in March. 10 years ago, the sympathetic hearing scheme was introduced. How effective has it been? Agnes finds out. And we take a trip to Luton to visit a remarkable young man who has had to rebuild his life after an accident at work. But first, news about the Civil Rights Bill that's currently going through Parliament. The bill has been proposed by Labour MP Roger Berry and aims to set up a law to make discrimination against disabled people illegal. The Civil Rights Bill has existed with different names before, but all with the same purpose. In the last 10 years, both Jack Ashley and Alf Morris have tried to get a law passed, but it's always been unsuccessful. In fact, the last time such a bill was presented to the House, in February 1992, it was talked out. Last month, there was a mass rally outside Parliament to lobby MPs to vote for the Civil Rights Bill. We went along to find out whether the second reading would be successful.
I'm fed up waiting. It's been 3 long years of campaigning and just being ignored. But hopefully the lobby today may wake everybody up.
Well, I think today's a lot more hopeful. I think people feel that maybe we'll make some progress this time. But at the same time, we still can't be sure. It's too soon to say. But personally, I'm delighted at the turnout today. 2 years ago, we had about 1,000 people altogether. About half of them were deaf people and the other half people with other disabilities. But this time, the response has been wonderful. It's been fabulous. And I'm really pleased about that. Deaf people have come down from Scotland, they've come from Wales, from all over England. It's just a marvellous response. And some of them, it's now 4:30, have been standing in the cold, waiting to go into the hall to talk to their MPs. And I think maybe altogether, there are more than 3,000 people here today. It's the best ever turnout.
Where to go? Okay.
Well, getting information from key people, we think it might well go through on Friday. But that's not the end. It still has to go to committee stage, which is most important, because at the committee stage it's very easy to cut the bill down and water it down so it becomes nothing really. And that's what we want to keep an eye on and make sure that what we end up with, we present for the third reading, is something that's good and strong and will work. The attendance at the lobby shows just how much support there is for the bill, and all 231 MPs present at the second reading voted for it. But what happens next? Roger Berry, you proposed the bill. Can you tell us what's happened since the second reading?
Well, the bill has been through committee, and that's where the members of the committee look in detail at the proposals, line by line, clause by clause. It's an opportunity, if you like, for people to put amendments forward to improve the bill, or if they're so minded, to try to water it down. I have to say the government have not been putting amendments forward at all, and so I think the bill has come out of committee in rather stronger shape than when it went in.
Well, it was a marvellous turnout at the lobby. Certainly there were lots and lots of people there. But how can people ensure that the bill continues to progress through Parliament?
I think the most important thing is that people continue to put pressure on their members of Parliament. I mean, the only reason that at the second reading debate there wasn't a single member of Parliament voting against the bill was that we had all received literally thousands of postcards, letters, telephone calls, representations from people. The lobby that we've seen on the screen demonstrated the support for the bill. I think members of Parliament have to be reminded that there are still more hurdles to be overcome before the bill reaches the statute book, and that the public, if they feel passionately about the bill, have got to make sure their members of Parliament know that and ask for their continued support.
So if the bill is passed and becomes law, what do you think it's going to mean? What sort of changes are we going to have for people with disabilities, and deaf people in particular?
Well, for the first time ever, it would be unlawful in this country to discriminate against deaf people or other people with disabilities. It would mean, for example, in employment, that an employer would not simply be able to choose not to employ a deaf person. If that were to happen, then the individual could make a complaint, could pursue it through the Disability Rights Commission, and ultimately take the case to a tribunal. It is to ensure that disabled people have the same rights in employment, in the provision of housing, education, leisure facilities, the same rights as everybody else. It's in the same spirit as legislation that is currently working, I think, rather well in the United States, and therefore a precedent for Britain, but it's it's legislation that does work elsewhere.
Well, you mentioned it's working well abroad, particularly in the States. So logically, there's no reason why we shouldn't get a bill here. But why has it failed so many times?
Well, the truth of the matter is that the government has objected to the bill because they suggest it might cost money. They're not happy to set up a Disability Rights Commission that they think might recommend changes in government policy. But I think we're making progress. The very fact that although the government does not support the bill, and indeed would like to see it blocked, they have not voted against. They don't want to be seen in public to oppose the bill. So I think as long as the pressure is maintained on members of Parliament, particularly members of the government, it is just possible that we might get the bill through this year. But I have to say, if the bill does not become law this year, it certainly will next year or in the very near future. We'll look back in 10 years' time and wonder how on earth it took so long to outlaw discrimination against disabled people.
Roger, many thanks indeed. As Roger has already mentioned, the United States and other countries, including Canada and Australia, already have anti-discrimination legislation. In America, in 1992, the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA, was introduced. It's currently being phased in and will ensure that people cannot be turned down for jobs or training solely on the grounds of a disability. American deaf lawyer Robert Mather has been very involved in the American legislation and will be one of the guest speakers at the Strength in Numbers meetings. These are public meetings organized by the RNID and the BDA to discuss the issues involved in achieving civil rights for disabled people. The purpose is to show how strong public opinion is and how the Civil Rights Bill can become law by continued pressure and strength in numbers. They are to be held in mid-May in London, Glasgow Bristol and Manchester. It's your opportunity to get more information, which you can then put to your MP to make sure he or she represents you. Our cameras will be at one of the venues so we can report back in June. You'll find details about the times and places of the meetings on page 710 of Read Here. But now let's move on. Agnes.
A day out shopping, calling in at your local bank. Simple day-to-day tasks can sometimes be quite stressful. Why? Because the person you're trying to communicate with has difficulty understanding you. To solve this problem, the Sympathetic Hearing Scheme was set up over 10 years ago to help improve communication between the deaf customer and the hearing shop assistant, bank clerk, whatever. Organisations that have joined the scheme display the international ear symbol to show that they are committed to giving deaf customers a better service. We visited a popular high street bank to find out just how good they were at listening.
Hello, can I help you? What can I do for you? Let's just take some details. What's your surname? Mason. And your first name? Clive. Okay, that's fine. Your checkbook and check card will be sent to you in the post. Thank you.
I always carry the card, even though I don't always need to use it.
That when I show it to people, they immediately know that there may be a problem with communication.
When somebody thinks you can't hear, they shout, and that really throws me, because even if it's kindly meant, a raised voice is threatening. There's a certain threat in it.
If a customer comes to us and presents their card, we take them over to our reception area where we can see them on a one-to-one basis and talk to them without the barriers of the cashier's screen or an inquiry counter.
I'd like to see this displayed all over the country.
Oh yes, and bigger. That's how I'd like it.
Well, it's clear the Midland Bank are committed to the deaf customer. But is this a realistic picture of what's happening in other public places? We thought we'd find out. So with a hidden camera, two guest reporters, Kathleen Grehan and Alan Roberts, we went to investigate.
I am deaf. I wonder, scheme. I am interested in the red jacket. Could I? Very nice. Look after them. No, a little better. You don't have on. This is, yeah, plenty room. It's room under there. That's important.
Kathleen and Alan are here to report back to us. Now, Kathleen, what was your general overview feeling when you went to the shops? Well, I was surprised with two of them. I went into mother care, and the assistant there, I mean, I was trying to sign to her and she didn't understand me. And I didn't ask for a piece of paper and a pen, but she did bring one, which I thought was very satisfactory. Then I went into McDonald's, and I was trying to indicate what I wanted, and she more or less asked me if I wanted a burger, and I said no. And then again she gave me a pen and paper, so I was pleasantly surprised with that. But basically everyone was very nice. So Alan, what was your general impression of the day?
One point I would like to make very clear is that there was, after all the shops that we visited during the day, there was one shop only, Debenhams in Oxford Street, which was part of the scheme. The other shops and big stores that we visited, although they may not have had training, gave me very great help. And I really thought that a lot of them had already had training. It was very important that when you spoke to them, eye contact was kept up so that lip reading was able to be used. I found it most impressive that so many shops gave such a good impression.
Now, Kathleen, because Alan spoke for himself and you're a sign language user, did you have a different reaction? Yes, I think the reaction was different. When I showed the card to the assistant, they read the card, and then it was almost like they were waiting for something else from me. And then I started signing and said that I was deaf. And they tried to pick it up, but obviously if they couldn't understand me, then I would ask for a pen and paper. But some of them couldn't find a pen or find some paper, and it really threw them, so there were slight problems. But then with others, it was quite useful, because they actually managed to understand what I was signing. For example, just saying thank you or whatever. So Alan, do you think this card is helpful, and are there any ways it could be improved?
Agnes, I've had a few doubts about the card for many years. Unfortunately, there is a line through the symbol of the ear, which unfortunately gives rather a negative attitude. It can be compared to some of the signs in the highway code, which mean no entry and no parking. Otherwise, I'm quite happy with the card and want deaf people to use it more.
The sympathetic hearing scheme is run by Hearing Concern. Cliff Doherty, how do you react to feedback from Kathleen and Alan?
I think it's very interesting. I was pleased to note that although only one store was actually in the scheme, that there was such a good reaction from, if you like, untrained members of the public. I would say that really this is an area which we need to build on, because obviously there's this willingness to help, and we do need to build on that.
Now, Kathleen seems to have had a harder time in the shops. So does that mean that the scheme is only for hard of hearing people?
No, not really. The scheme should be for deaf and hard of hearing people. When we're actually training staff, we do actually say that the scheme is for both groups of people, that there's different communication tactics needed, and we always try to give information on both sides of the need. But again, I think this is an area we can look at more closely and see if we can reinforce that message that that deaf people do need to have clear communication.
So what sort of training does your organisation provide?
Well, we use a number of different techniques. Firstly, we try and tailor the training to the organisation we're going to, and we also try to train the personnel staff so they can continue. Obviously we cover deaf awareness. We have a video which shows people what it's like to be both profoundly deaf and a hearing aid wearer. Role play, all the usual training techniques. We try to involve the people as much as possible. It's very easy to tell people why things are the way they are, but it's much better to actually involve them in it, which is what we try to do in the training.
Now, it's quite interesting that they said that only one shop was affiliated to your scheme throughout the survey that we did. Why are there so few?
I don't think that's necessarily the case. The scheme's not just restricted to shops. There's certainly quite a few high street names that are in the scheme, but also we have the Passport Office, we have several of the regional tourist boards, we're currently targeting travel agents, and also several of the electricity and gas companies have all taken this on board. So it's an ongoing process, and it's an ongoing awareness-raising exercise, really.
Okay, well, thank you all very much indeed. This month's edition of the See Here magazine has more details about the scheme. The magazine is not available from shops, but on subscription. If you'd like a copy, write to See Here magazine, RNID 105 Gower Street, London WC1E 6AH.
Tony Loney is 26, and 3 years ago he suffered a terrible accident at work. He was operating a wood chip machine when both of his hands were dragged into the machine and severed. When I first heard that Tony had had an accident, it was quite a shock, because I really couldn't imagine Tony, who has no speech really, having an accident where he lost most of his hands. I just couldn't conceive of it. So we went to the hospital, and it was Mount Vernon Hospital. And when we saw Tony there, it really was a shock. His hands were just bandaged up, and it was dreadful. It really was a shock to me. Well, it's very hard for me to know exactly what Tony feels, but I think I can say that he seemed to think that he would have new hands growing. I'm sure he felt that. Like a nail will grow or hair grows again, I think Tony felt his hands would grow in the same way. Because his reaction seemed to be, well, it's all right, you know, what's the real problem? And eventually one of us had to tell Tony that his hands would not grow again, and I think that was a real shock for him. But he got over it quickly enough. Well, how Tony communicates with deaf people is a problem. You really have to know him, because he doesn't have a great deal of language, he's quite limited. And when he wants to sign to people, he has to wave his arms around like this, so it's not very clear. And sometimes you have to know really what's in his mind. You have to be Tony if you can, so that when you're communicating, you almost know the answer before he gives it to you.
We decided to fit him with leather gauntlets with split hooks so he can establish independence, both in washing, dressing, looking after himself, eating, drinking. That's our first aim, and I found he really could manage very well. And we worked very hard at different exercises to practice these skills. We always initially give people split hooks if we can, and that's the type of device that he's using now. You can see exactly what you're doing. There's nothing obstructing your view. You can do very small things, you can do very large things. With a hand, you've actually just got this very large grip. It actually gets quite large, but I can't open it very easily. But it limits it. You won't be able to see quite so much, and with his own hand, if he finishes there, then his arm will be much too long, because his hand could only go in that far, but his hand is up to here. So he would end up, if he had a hand with an arm that's too long, it would not benefit his signing, because he can actually write the letters, and this does not allow you to do the individual signs like this or like this that you would require to do with the finesse of signing.
Communicating with Tony has been a problem in the past, but it's getting better. Quite a few of the lads have learned and are learning sign language. Biggest problem really is not us communicating to Tony, it's Tony communicating to us. Because with his lack of fingers, you can imagine it, you've got somebody doing this, doesn't mean a lot. And it's a case then of perhaps writing it down on a piece of paper to see what he's trying to tell us. My hopes for Tony's future is that he could get himself a good job. He's got a very good brain there. I do quite a bit with Tony, as you've seen. I'm here with him most days. I don't think I could do much more for him than I would do for my own son, and I would really love to see him with a good job.
What a very courageous young man. Tony has adjusted his life and is now keen to find work again, and we all wish him every success. Well, that's all we've got time for this week. Do join us next week when Jack reports on a support group for people with acquired deafness. Bye-bye for now.